This is it on? Okay, awesome. And excuse my tears, I have a cold, so my throat's a little scratchy, so I'm, but welcome to Base Talks. For those of you that don't know me, I was gonna say, okay, for those of you that don't, my name is Wendy Dewhurst Clark. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. It really means a lot to me for you to be here to support me. So as a 4-part speaker series, BASE, Business, Arts, Science, and Entertainment, is designed to target forward thinkers of all ages who want to learn about interesting and relevant topics, engage in stimulating conversation, and increase self-awareness. And I think that's something we really need here in this community. I think we need to get back to basics. My goal is to enhance community engagement, add value to the local arts and entertainment, and create a platform for ongoing communication on specific topics. Similar to the well-known TED Talks, Base Talks is designed to provide powerful talks, spreading ideas, and building clearinghouse of knowledge. And I truly believe that knowledge is power. My love of learning and listening to the many stories from speakers throughout the years as a photojournalist was my inspiration for developing Base Talks. Selfishly, I wanted a series right here in Manatee County that I could continue to hear stories from speakers from all over the world under all different topics. And I get to pick the speakers. Yay! Beginning in February 2018, we will launch the first of the 4-part series, which will wrap up by the end of March. So we'll have those 4 series within that 2-month span. Please like our Base Talks Facebook page and check back often to see updates on speakers and other exciting additions to the event. Tonight, it's brought to you by some amazing sponsors in our community. The Manatee Community Foundation and the Community Foundation of Sarasota are my community sponsor tonight. My media sponsor is the Bradenton Herald, and my presenting sponsor is the Manatee Performing Arts Center. Yay! Tonight, we're celebrating 4 of those amazing gems that live right here in our community. We have amazing people in our community. I said, well, actually it's 5. The first person I'd like to introduce is my good friend, Jason Champion. Jason is all about bass. He is creative, entertaining, passionate, and has a heart of gold. He owns his own interior design firm and been featured on HGTV Design Star Top 4 and is the winner of HGTV's Show House Showdown. Jason brings the business of arts and entertainment into every project he does. Jason will be introducing our speakers tonight and moderating our Q&A. Please welcome to the stage, Jason Champion.
Congratulations, Wendy. This is pretty amazing. Everybody give her a round of applause again. So welcome to the Base Talk launch. How fun is this? Thank you again for masterminding this informative, exciting series. Tonight is action-packed with 4 amazing speakers that will share their professional journey to success. Each speaker has about 15 minutes. We'll let them go over or go less, depending on if I feel like it or not. To conclude tonight, though, we'll end with an open Q&A session, which I already have staged questions, so get ready for those, along with taking audience participation. But enough about me talking and jumping right in. Let's get into our first speaker. I want to introduce Mr. John Craner. Mr. Craner serves as CEO of New College. and has more than 30 years of management experience in food service, something that I'm very familiar with, and retail, including senior executive positions with Coca-Cola, Taco Bell, Wilson Sporting Goods, and Frito-Lay. John holds a Bachelor of Art degree from New College of Florida and a Master's of Business and Administration from Harvard University Graduate School of Business. Please welcome to the stage Mr. John Craner.
I have to see you. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Wendy. It's a pleasure to be here. When Wendy called me and asked me to speak, I asked her what she wanted me to speak on, and she said anything. So this is a very difficult assignment that I had. So what I thought I'd do is talk about two dominant retailers, because we're all familiar with retail stores and businesses, and take a look at how these two different retailers operate, what they can and can't do, and a little bit of history. Shortly after the American Civil War, two enterprising entrepreneurs bought a shipment of gold watches and sold them at retail. They bought more, launched a catalog of watches and jewelry, and founded a company they named Sears Roebuck. Over time, the company expanded its offerings of merchandise. The two businessmen added more and more new items. They expanded its catalog to, get this, 530 pages. They have distributed the catalog and merchandise throughout the country, and many customers lived on farms where Sears delivered merchandise via the mail to farmers all over the country. In 1906, the company sold stock in the first IPO in American retail history. That same year, it opened a 40-acre logistics center in Chicago. 40 acres. That's a lot. By the 1920s, Sears had opened retail stores, which soon outsold the catalog, and the company introduced its own brands of merchandise: Craftsman, Die Hard, Kenmore, all familiar names. It spun off a subsidiary for selling insurance, Allstate, and arguably Sears became the dominant name in the retail sector and the largest retailer in the world. As a sign of success, Sears built the world's tallest skyscraper in downtown Chicago. And by the 80s, Sears adopted a socks and stocks strategy, where it had, in addition to its merchandise offerings through its retail outlets, they expanded their financial services by purchasing stockbroker Dean Witter Reynolds, real estate broker Coldwell Banker, and they also launched the Discover Card. Now, at this time, some sophisticated competition emerged to challenge Sears, a company you might have heard of, Walmart. Began an aggressive expansion driven by great in-store service and best of company low prices. In response to Walmart, Kmart moved to buy Sears for $11 billion. The mastermind of that deal was Kmart chairman Edward Lampert, a hedge fund manager. And Lampert split Kmart, Sears, into 40 separate operating divisions. Think about that. Each one of them which reported their profits separately. Under Lampert's leadership, Sears Kmart profits peaked at $1.5 billion in 2006. And from 2011 to 2016, the company lost $10.4 billion. Its total debt surpassed its market capitalization. The Wall Street Journal reported that Lampert was, quote, the most hated CEO in America. In the last 4 months, Sears Holdings has announced that it will close 226 more stores. The Wall Street Journal reported that Sears will no longer sell the Whirlpool appliances it has carried since 1916. Sad story. A second retailer. Now, just as Sears identified a market niche and built a corporation around it, so did Amazon. Direct mail books and a whole lot more. In 1994, Jeff Bezos developed a business plan for what would become Amazon. He identified 20 products that could be sold on the internet and chose the 5 most promising: compact discs, computer hardware, computer software, videos, and books. Books soon became the primary product of Amazon. While Sears Roebuck produced much of its own line of products, especially their clothing and tools, Amazon took books from other sources and merchandised them via the internet. It may surprise you to know that Amazon does not make anything. In many ways, Sears outgrew its business model, and in many ways, Amazon continues to redefine its business model. While founder Jeff Bezos continued to develop opportunities for companies to offer their products and services through the Amazon distribution structure, he was also looking for more distribution opportunities via Amazon. He developed a culture which was customer-focused and creative in its communications and willingness to pursue new opportunities. Those included Yahoo, Netscape, and AOL. As Amazon continued to grow, adding new acquisitions, one thing remains. Amazon is first and foremost an online retailer. The company has exceptional capacities and creativity. But one thing should be kept in mind. Amazon is first, last, and always a retail sales organization. Amazon makes nothing. It just distributes things, and they do it quite well. A cautionary tale. Sears. What can Amazon learn from the faults of one of the dominant retailers of the last century? Number one, maintain control of your brand, your quality, and your market. Sears failed in many cases to do all 3 of those things. Number 2, focus on quality in every aspect of your organization. The very best people, the very best facilities, the very best locations. Again, Sears lost focus. Don't be afraid to try things, but don't just try things. Try things hard. So with that, I'd be happy to chat with you later on about these 2 retail opportunities. One of them very successful, one of them arguably all but dead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very informative, nothing shocking, but excited to hear your take on it. Our next speaker is someone that I have found quite funny in the short period of time that I've met her, and her name is Lisa Daly. Get her book. One of the quotes that I pulled from Lisa was, "It only took one episode of Bewitched to know that advertising was the career for her." Lisa Daly, she can also tell you why he didn't call, or the color you should never wear on your first date, and where you should snoop if you think that your guy is cheating on you. Millions read her dating advice columns and tune into her every week on Daytime. And the buzz of her new novel, Single-Minded, is with the same signature quirky humor and fresh voice that has made her dating advice books, Stop Getting Dumped, a bestseller. So welcome to the stage, Miss Lisa Daly.
You're so sweet. Thank you. Hi. So Wendy also, when she asked me to speak, I said the same thing. What would you like me to talk about? And she said, oh, whatever you want. Which is really hard for someone who's speaking, because you are used to sort of being kind of pigeonholed. But one of the things that she said she was really interested in was the story of how I got published, which is the weirdest publishing story there ever was. And part of the reason it's so weird is because there's no way to duplicate it. It's not, I broke every single rule you could possibly imagine. I had no idea what I was doing, and yet it all worked out really, really well for me. So I always knew I wanted to be a writer. So the line about watching one episode of Bewitched and knowing that advertising was the career for me, this happened when I was a little kid. I was homesick one day, and you know how on Bewitched they would always have, Samantha would get them into some sort of crazy thing, and Darren would try to save the day, and it would always end up being Samantha that saved the day. But at the last minute, Darren's boss, Larry, would come in, and Darren was supposed to be working on his account, but he wasn't. He was off fooling around somewhere. And then, Larry would, of course, bring the client over to whatever disaster was happening, and Darren, on the fly, would put together some magnificent presentation. And I thought, I come up with crazy crap all the time. I could totally do that job. So I started in advertising, and I worked for 8 years as an advertising creative. And I loved advertising because you have a lot of really smart people. You're working on different projects every day. And there is a lot of opportunity for craziness, although not in the way that Darren really pulled it off. That never really happened. After my first child was born, I had decided that I wanted to go ahead and try and write that book that I had always known I was going to write. And the book that I was burning to write was not the great American novel. It was a dating advice book for my friend Tina, who was the worst dater on the planet. I mean, the worst. The person who's driving by your house at 2 o'clock in the morning to see if you're there, that's Tina. The person who's calling you 87 times after your first date just to check in and see how it's going, that's Tina. So, this girl was like an internet stalker before there was an internet. So I'm thinking, okay, I want to write this book for Tina, and I am completely unqualified for this, other than the fact that I had always been a fairly successful dater, and I had gotten some very good advice from my mother and my grandmothers and my little aunties. So I have this child who's napping every day for 3 hours, and for any of you who are parents, you know that that's quite a miracle. He was like every day down for 3 hours and then up, a miracle. And I think, okay, and I'm not working, I'm staying home, and I think this is the time, I'm going to write this book. So I sit down every day at nap time and I write this dating advice book. And as I'm starting to think about getting it published, I do a little research, which I'm prone to do as a writer and creative type. And I look at how much you get paid if you go through a traditional publisher, and I see, well, they pay you 7% royalty on a trade paperback and maybe 10 to 15% on a hardcover. And I'm thinking, that doesn't seem like very much money. I have to do all the hard part. I have to write this book. And so then I look at self-publishing and I think well, it's not really, it's not quite as prestigious, but you make like 50 or 60% of the cover price, and I think that sounds like a much better deal. And I have a marketing background and I know a bunch of art directors, and I think I can do this. I can totally do this. So I do. I get an art director friend of mine to come up with a cover. I write this book. I have another friend of mine edit it. And I'm like, well, I'm on a deadline here. Valentine's Day is around the corner, so I'm just going to produce this thing. And it was literally like a matter of like a month and a half. Put this book together. It comes out on Valentine's Day. And then I have a giant box of, like crates of books in my garage. And I think I'm going to have to get this out into the stores, or no one will know it exists. And certainly Tina will never benefit. So then I think, okay, I'm gonna, at this point I'm still thinking like, well, if I sell these books, I'm gonna make a lot more money if I do this on my own. But I'm thinking I need to promote this book, and because I have a marketing background, I'm gonna start doing that. So I start sending out these little pitches and press kits to the local radio station and TV, and I start getting booked because there's some kind of weird stuff in the book about dating. Like one thing about, this is, if you want to know what you should smell like when you go on a date, there was actually this fascinating study from the University of Chicago's Smell and Taste Institute that found that men associate the scents of cinnamon and vanilla with love. Men are a little weirder, as we all know, and they associate the sense of, they are actually attracted to the sense of licorice and pepperoni pizza. So if you're a lady, right, yeah, it's an interesting thing. So I have that in my book. I've got some kind of weird stuff in there. And I start pitching it. I'm getting all this attention from radio stations, from TV stations. I'm doing a lot of interviews. And at the time, you didn't have as many, you didn't have like the satellite radio. So if I did a radio interview, I would often sell somewhere up, upwards of about 1,000 books every time I did a radio interview. Which now, if I do a radio interview, I sell like 6 books. So it was a much different thing. But because the book was initially self-published, stores like Barnes & Noble would not take a national buy because they did not do that, which didn't even occur to me to ask before I published the book. And so, but they could order the book. A customer could, hear me on the radio, go into their local Barnes & Noble, and they could order it. The store would order it for them and ship it. Well, because I wasn't sending big crates of books to Barnes & Noble, every time I did a radio interview, all these orders would be faxed in or emailed in, and I would be in my garage in February in Minnesota, shipping 1 book at a time, 2 books at a time. And I'm thinking, well, I know I get to keep 70% of this cover price, but I don't know that I'm getting the better end of the deal here. So I decide I'm going to hire a publicist for 30 hours, which anyone who's ever worked with a publicist knows that this is about 10 minutes in human time. And it costs a lot of money. And so I think, okay, I'm going to do this. We're going to get this book out some more. We're going to sell some more copies. And in the meantime, every time I do an interview, I'm out in the garage shipping 1 book at a time. So one time I come in, it's February, I'm freezing my butt off, and there's a call from my brand new publicist, and we had talked about pitching the book to a show called Ally McBeal. Do you guys remember that show? Right? So there's a character on the show named Elaine, and she does all this wild and crazy stuff. She's always like trying to snag a man. And so we think, okay, this book, Stop Getting Dumped, is going to be the perfect book for the show. We send it off. They send a letter back and say, we're so sorry, but we can't look at this unless it comes from a literary agent or a film agent. And because I, in my infinite wisdom of book publishing, had decided to self-publish, I obviously had never approached a book agent, and so I didn't have it. But my brand new publicist says, you know what, I have a friend who's a literary agent, and she can slap a cover letter on it, and we'll just ship that thing right back. Am I making like a thundery sound? See, it's like either like, this is a really powerful speaker, like that she changed the weather, it was incredible. So we shipped this book off to Ally McBeal, and and so I'm coming in from the garage one day, and I get this phone call from this strange woman named Lorraine Kisley, and she says, I know you don't know me, but I am the person who wrote the letter for your book, and I loved it. And if you ever want to sell it to a big New York publisher, call me and let me know. That does not happen. For anyone who's ever tried to publish a book or get an agent, it involves thousands and thousands of emails and letters and begging and all sorts of, it just never happens where someone randomly says, hey, if you'd like to sell a book, you just let me know. And here I am, freezing, coming in from the garage, and I think, I might like to sell my book to a big New York publisher. So I chat with her on the phone. I really like her. I think she's fabulous. I send off my book to her along with a little marketing package. And this is like on a Friday. And on Monday, she's going to get this package. And I get a call from my exciting new publicist who has lined up 11 interviews for me, 11. One of which was the Sally Jesse Raphael show. There, the little red glasses. So, what's so funny is, like, as much as she sort of got a reputation later in life for doing, like, some kind of wacky interviews, she actually is one of the best interviewers I've ever encountered. And I have now done about 2,000 interviews, and she really is quite a talent. So I call my brand new agent of 20 minutes and I say, guess what? I'm going to be in New York. I'm going to do the Sally Jesse Raphael show. And she says, fantastic. Let me set up I've got to go. Let me set up meetings for you with all the publishers. And I say, okay, great. So she does that. I fly to New York on like Thursday. I'm ready, I'm show ready because the ladies at Nordstrom have picked out an outfit for me and shoes, and I'm wearing more makeup than any one person needs to wear in a lifetime. But I do the show, Sally is awesome, I totally killed it, and afterwards, I would say, like, I do the first show and I think, I am born for television, and then like 17 other interviews after that, I was not born for television. I was just lucky, and it was because Sally Jesse Raphael is really good. So I do the interview. She sets up meetings for me at all 6 publishing houses. I make it to, I think, 3, possibly 4 before I have to get on the plane back to Minneapolis. And by the end of the week, we had offers from all 6 houses, which is insane. It never happens. Thank you. Oh, here, I'll take a look. So we have offers from all 6 houses, which is crazy. And then I end up signing with Plume, which is a division of Penguin, and my editor was the editor-in-chief, so she had a lot of pull. So she decides she wants to crash the book. And that is something that never ever happens. It's very weird. It basically means that they're going to put the book out on shelves as fast as they can print it. So my version of this book came out in February, and the Penguin edition came out 6 weeks after we made the deal, and this was just a verbal deal. We make the deal, the book is out 6 weeks later in May, that's a really small, which is crazy. Here's the funny thing, publishing is such a quill and ink business. It's this big, antiquated, slow-moving, and that's a writer word. And I actually had books on shelves in every Barnes & Noble in the country before I had the contracts. Because it takes the legal, even though it's the exact same contract over and over and over again, it takes like 2 months to get the contract, 6 weeks to print the books. So yeah, I know it's kind of a huge thing. But the book went on to be this bestseller. I'm still getting interviews and great talks like this from it 15 years later. And so then I started writing other types of books. And I guess my little inspirational message, because that's what Wendy was wanting, was something that was sort of inspirational, is that it's totally okay if you have no idea what you're doing. Thank you. I mean, you can, a lot of time, I'm a person that likes to research things, and I think that sometimes it gives us the idea that we have some sort of control. And the truth is some of the best stuff that has ever happened to me in my entire life was when I just raised my hand and said, yeah, I can do that, without any idea what I was doing. And a lot of times you can sort of figure things out as you go, or you can always ask somebody who knows what you're doing. But a lot of times just the momentum and the energy and the enthusiasm and the fact that you're willing to just put yourself out there brings other people to you who will help you. Like the publicist who got me 11 interviews, including Sally Jesse Raphael, who brought me my agent, who brought me to my awesome editor, who now is responsible for me becoming a USA Today bestseller, and now I'm on my 7th book. Thank you. Yay. So that's a cool thing, and I just to sort of add to that, the second book I ever did, of course, the first book is a dating book. And because it sold well, the publisher is naturally saying, "Hey, you should write another dating book." And so of course I said, I really want to write a novel. And so I ended up selling my first book on 9 chapters and an idea, and got the contract because the first book did well, and then realized after I had cashed the check that I did not actually know how to write a novel. And yet, it ended up being one of my favorite writing experiences that I ever had. I loved the book until Single-Minded, which is my latest, just came out. 15 Minutes of Shame, which was my first novel, was my favorite. And I'm grateful every day that I was stupid or brave or just crazy enough to do the thing that I wanted to do most, because it rewards me every day. I'm grateful every day that I have the ability to do this thing that I have always loved, and also that I'm not so tied to what I know, that I'm okay to do stuff where I might be a terrible failure and just blow the whole thing up. And that's still okay, because I think if you're not failing, sometimes you're not trying hard enough. So there you go. That's my little chat.
Poor Tina. I bet she didn't get one royalty from that either, did she? That's actually her running around upstairs chasing men. So, yeah, I would say that's probably how that's happening. So what do you think so far? Again, thank you, Wendy. This is an amazing little brainchild that you've had for here in Manatee County. It's pretty amazing that you've got this pool of talent that you can pull from and give some good advice and talks of what you guys do. You know, I already know, and I've learned a lot, and there's more exciting information to come. But want to first say thank you to some of the major sponsors that helped put this on for their generosity, is the community foundations of Sarasota and Manatee County, Bradenton Herald, and the Manatee Performing Arts Center. Even though Tina is running loose upstairs still, we're gonna ignore that for a second. I hope to God Tina's okay. I really do worry about her. So. And I hope she's happily married at this point. But one of my first speakers that we're going to bring up now, I'm very excited about, because I'm kind of a little bit of a science nerd myself. I haven't told him that yet. I know where the Big Dipper is, so that's about as far as I go, though, is Mr. Jeff Rogers. Jeff loves guiding students to the furthest reaches of the known universe with smooth and confident narration, kind of like myself. Jeff Rogers is also the Southwest Florida's Neil deGrasse Tyson, if you guys know who that is. And I actually said that backwards. It's Neil deGrasse Tyson. Whatever. I'm jacked up on pumpkin pie, people. I mean, seriously. Since 2004, Rogers has encouraged intergalactic exploration for the Bradenton South Florida Museum and the Bishop Planetarium, where he engages overflow audiences with classes like Science Today, A Short History of Nearly Everything, and an Earthbound Human's Guide to the Universe. Some people even take their classes multiple times, which is pretty cool. One of the quotes that I like to say from Jeff, though, is that he likes to see it when the light bulb goes off. And actually, he's made the light bulb go off to me a couple of times, because now I know there's a Little Dipper. So with that said, let's welcome to the stage Mr. Jeff Rogers.
I'm going to try this one. Evening, everybody. So Wendy also cornered me and asked if I would like to participate in the launch of Base Talks, and I said, of course, and like the others, what can I talk about? Anything. So I said, great, I would like to tell my favorite story. I want to tell the story of how we got a universe from nothing. How long do I have? 10 minutes. All right, so I've blown one of those, so let's go with that story. It's really hard for people to wrap their heads around the idea that the universe that we see around us today began from nothing. How do you get something from nothing? There's a way out of this, though. In quantum physics, where we deal with the very small, there is no such thing as nothing. You can never get down to pure nothing. The best you can do is get down to something called the Planck space, which is defined by the Planck length, which is the smallest length that makes any sense to anyone. So there's this really small space, and you might ask, well, how small is this space? It's about 1.6 times 10 to the negative 35th meters, if that helps. Does that help? It doesn't help. All right, so let's try a bad analogy then. Imagine a human hair, the width of a human hair, and that's about 1/10 of a millimeter in width, and that's about the smallest thing your eye can see. So you take that, and we're going to blow that width of a human hair up to the diameter of the observable universe, which is about 92 billion light years across. Now remember, 1 light year is about 6 trillion miles, so that's 6 trillion times 92 billion miles across. That is now the width of that human hair. So how big is the Planck space in there? We're going to introduce another human hair, and the width of that hair in the middle of the entire observable universe, that's the scale of the Planck space. So we're talking very, very small here. Whatever the smallest thing you can imagine is, you are way off. This is much, much smaller. But when you get down to that scale, there's always something happening. Particles are popping in and out of existence. There's no such thing as nothing at that scale. So the universe begins from one of these very small, not nothing spaces, and something happens. We don't know what happens, but the universe begins to expand. Space itself is being created, and inside that space is pure energy. In the first 10 million billion 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 billionths of a second, our universe has gone from Planck space-sized to the size of a grapefruit. Now, I know that doesn't sound too impressive, a grapefruit-sized universe, but to get from that small to that big in that short of a time, really, really impressive. But the tricky part is now we have space, although just a little bit of it. The universe continues to expand, but it's filled with just energy. It's not filled with any matter. We don't have any stuff to make you or me or cats or dogs or planets. So we need to get matter from that energy. We can go to Einstein for the answer to that. Do you all remember E equals mc squared? It's the most famous science equation ever. He never wrote that equation, just so you know. That's not his work. That was derived from his work later. But the big news there is E, energy, equals m, mass, or for our purposes, matter. What Einstein told us is that energy and matter are the same thing. They're two sides of the same coin. And you can have matter precipitate out of energy as it cools down to certain temperatures. This sounds really strange, but it's not. You've seen things like this your whole life. Think about water. We've got water vapor, and when it cools down to a certain temperature, it changes into something else, a liquid. It changes its phase. And then you cool it down to another temperature, and it becomes a solid. What Einstein told us is that matter does the same thing. It pops out of energy. So, within the first minute of the universe, we start to get these little particles, these things called quarks, and quarks come together to make these things called protons and neutrons. Does this feel like 8th grade science yet already? And we have these other little things called electrons, and they're all flying around really fast, and they can't get themselves together to make atoms yet. It takes 380,000 years for the universe to cool down enough until we get our first atoms. And all we get is hydrogen and helium. That's the only matter that we have in the universe. So somehow we have to go from that hydrogen and helium to get to everything we see around us today. Einstein comes to the rescue again. He tells us that space is not nothing, it's something. You've heard the phrase, the fabric of space-time. And what Einstein was telling us is if you put something that has mass into space, space bends in response to that matter. So you can think of space as being the ultimate sagging mattress. And when you put something in it, it bends and it makes little dips. And when other things come rolling by, they can roll down that hill and stick to the other thing. So hydrogen starts to make little dips in space, and then another hydrogen comes by and it rolls down. And now we have two, and the dip gets bigger until eventually we get these giant spheres of hydrogen and helium. These are our first stars. Stars make their energy through fusion. What happens is gravity is trying to crunch everything down into the center of the star, and when things contract, they get really hot. And now those electrons have been stripped away again, so it's just protons flying around, and they crash into each other, and they stick, and they give off energy. But they've made a new element. And hydrogen sticks together to give us helium. And then we start running out of hydrogen, and the helium starts sticking together, and it gives us nitrogen. And then the nitrogen starts running out, and we start to get carbon and oxygen. And we go all the way up to iron. And we know exactly how much iron needs to be formed in the center of a star. It's 1.5 times the mass of our sun, which is a lot of iron in the center of the star. But then the whole thing shuts down, because no star is massive enough to fuse iron. So this balance that's been happening with these stars, gravity trying to crush them, but the energy from the core holding that crushing force at bay, stops. Gravity takes over, everything crunches down into the center, and it explodes out in a beautiful explosion that we call a supernova. And in the cloud of that supernova, we have carbon and oxygen and nitrogen and all those other heavy elements that you need to start making other things like moons and planets. Gravity pulls those things together again, and some planets form around stars. And some of those planets, like Earth, are just the right distance away from their star that liquid water can form. The elixir, the stuff where the chemistry of life can happen. And in that, you mix up the carbon and the hydrogen and the oxygen and the nitrogen, and that forms amino acids, and those can make proteins. And you put those together with a little bit of sulfur and a little bit of phosphorus, and you have RNA and DNA, the blueprint for life. DNA is not alive, but it is the blueprint to give life its shape, its characteristics. Every characteristic you have is based on your DNA, and it's a beautiful thing. And the characteristics you have served you well so that you can thrive in your environment. And if your environment doesn't change, you're good. That means that you have the characteristics that you need so that you can acquire lunch. You can keep from becoming lunch for something else, because if you become lunch for something else, it's game over. But if you have enough lunch and you have enough energy and you have enough wherewithal to navigate your environment, you might just get a date on Saturday night. And if you get a date on Saturday night, you have increased your odds of passing your genes on to the next generation. But sometimes those genes aren't well suited for a changing environment, and populations tend to drift away from each other. And Darwin told us that because DNA can change over generations, and because there's great variety in populations, that new species can form as a result of change over long periods of time. And after 3.5 billion years of these changes happening in new species, you arrived on the scene about 200,000 years ago. You are essentially the naked mole rat of the primate family. If you don't know what a naked mole rat looks like, look it up when you get home. I'm sorry for what you're going to see. But you're brilliant. You have these big brains, and you have this ability to communicate these ideas that you have and the things that you've discovered. And we can write that stuff down, and we can pass that information on to the next generation so it doesn't disappear when we're done. And over generations, humans build up these ideas, and they start asking these questions about who are we, and where did we come from, and how did life get started, and what is the nature of this universe that we live in? And we invent the tools that help us to look out to answer those questions so that we can tell these stories today. If you need a mic drop at the end of this, you just go back to Carl Sagan, who said everything better than anybody like me ever will. And he said this: "You are a way for the universe to know itself. You are made of the stuff of the universe, and you've turned back around to figure out where you came from." And that's my story of the universe in 9 minutes.
Thank you.
Satisfied the narrative.
Perfect. So I guess my E equals MC square theory that I've had my whole life of eat more chocolate was not appropriate. It does work. It does work. And next we're going to bring up a little lady. She is quite exciting. And where is she? She's hiding. I can't even see her. Tina in the little audience. So Jenna Kopelman. She is going to speak about our entertainment this evening, and she is born in California but raised in Fort Worth, Texas. She took her small journey from a small theater in Texas all the way to New York to conquer the Great White Way. As a young adult, she experienced the magic of film and television and off-Broadway theater. Her greatest role in life, though, was to come as mother. With the birth of Hannah and Olivia, her two leading ladies, Jenna's passion and focus would be filling her daughter with confidence and self-esteem so they could shine in the world. This passion would become her mission statement in her highly esteemed performing arts school. Her desire to empower and equip all children has led to her next journey, Jambo's journey. And so she likes to say she wants to save the planet one precious child at a time. So please welcome to the stage Miss Jenna Kopelman.
Thank you so much. It's awesome to be here, and the pumpkin pies got him slurring because my name is Jenny Kopelman, but that's okay. Keep it coming. That's good.
I'm all jacked up, lady.
But we have Atlanta in common, so that's awesome. Wendy, thank you so much. It's great to be here. Wendy and I have spoken about this concept, this vision of hers, and so I would have been here tonight just to support her, but it's a special honor to be able to share my story with you. And I'm at home. I'm at home here because this is my world, the performing arts. And when I was 4 years old, my parents took me to see my first Broadway musical, and I saw an electrifying performance of Cabaret starring Liza Minnelli and Joel Grey. And that was it for me. And I was 4 years old with my bangs and my standing in the audience. And at the end, to my parents' dismay, I said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be like Liza Minnelli. I'm going to be on stage, and I'm going to tell stories, and I'm going to sing, and I'm going to dance, and I'm going to entertain people. I'm going to make people smile, and I'm going to make people laugh, and I'm going to make people feel. And I'm sure they thought that was a phase until the next evening they took me to see Mame, starring Angela Lansbury, who would later become my neighbor in New York City. And I just had an absolute magical view of the world when I was immersed in the performing arts. And so upstairs, the thundering pause that you hear, Lisa, is actually the children doing Annie. And so if they need a stand-in, I've got my whistle in the car. I'm ready to play Hannigan. I can play July or Pepper. I can play any of the parts because I've produced the show too many times to count. I'll be singing tomorrow even when they're putting me 6 feet under, I'm sure. But this is my home. I'm at home on the stage. I'm at home in a black box theater with an audience, and I love it. I've loved it all my life, and it's been my passion to tell stories and to listen to stories and to listen to music and watch dance. And yet, with the genius science expert over here with Jeff, I always asked myself the question, why am I here? You know, what is my life purpose? And that's really what I want to share about. Although I'm an artist and an actress and a singer and a dancer, I'm a creator, and I longed for a life purpose. Theater was my passion, and of course, having Hannah and Olivia, and then because I have 2 stepsons also, I realized that my life purpose was creating a safer, happier, self-sustaining world for children. Water equals life. Water equals life. It's what sets our planet apart. We have life because we have water. And so I would produce these shows, and I had just a tremendous journey in Atlanta with the Atlanta School of the Performing Arts. I have children who are touring in Hamilton and on primetime TV right now as we speak. And I've given children, I hope, their voice and self-confidence and self-esteem to navigate this ever-changing, complex world that children find themselves in, that's accelerated now because of the media, multimedia, the devices that they hold in their hand, the devices that they go to sleep with on their chest, and the devices that are constantly sending them information. But it was a magical experience, creating a theater like this in Atlanta, Georgia, watching children come in and out. I had children who were 3 years old, who I would allow to be an Annie. I had teenagers who really wanted to be a part of the business. But a life-changing phone call was a big catalyst for me. And a girlfriend who had a son the same age as my oldest daughter, Hannah, and they went to school together, but for some reason he was not in the school anymore, called me and said, "Jenny, I need you. I've started a school for my son. He was diagnosed with autism. And I need you to come to the school and use your Broadway, your theater, your performing arts, and help my students find their voice." And so I'm so excited to do this. I mean, I'm a little overdressed this evening, but I only have clothes like this to go to the theater, or I have workout clothes. Those are my 2 choices. So in lieu of my yoga pants tonight, I wore this. So I threw on my yoga pants, of course, and I went over to the Cumberland Academy of Georgia to help my girlfriend and these amazing, intelligent, creative children who had autism. So on several days of the week, I'm with children who are clamoring for the spotlight. "I want the main part, Miss Jen. I want to be Peter Pan. You know, cast me as, you know, Yenta and Fiddler on the Roof. That's my role." And then I had the other end of the spectrum, literally, of children who wouldn't even speak, had no desire to not only shine in the spotlight, but very little desire to communicate or connect to the world around them. And I racked my brain for how I would connect with these children because they were predominantly boys. And so I would go in and, my bubbly, energetic self, and they were not amused by that at all. They would say, Miss Jen, we're not doing Broadway, we have autism. And so I would try to do Broadway shows, but I would end up with Annie and her best friend Pokemon, or, some anime character. And I was convinced I would be thrown in prison for changing the scripts, of course. So I had to think of a way to allow these children to experience the same transformation that my Broadway students were experiencing. I had Broadway students ending up on stage in New York City at 8 years old. I mean, these were super talented kids in Buckhead. So I thought, I want these children to connect to the planet. And I've always loved the planet. I'm not so much the science girl, although I'm fascinated by it. But I did love nature. And so I created an imaginary world for autistic children and all children to connect to the planet. And I want to introduce you to my friend. I'm so at home with the puppets in the back row. This is Jambo. And these are some puppets that I created with my students. And Jambo is a hoopoe bird. Jambo needed friends. Jambo needed to be rescued. And so I wrote a story about a little girl named Jenny and her best friend Jambo, who fell from the sky while she was on a ship. And she saved him. And they made a pact with one another that when they grew up, they would travel the globe to every continent and teach children how to save the planet. And I think we can all agree that whether we politically agree with climate change or what it's called, I think we can all agree that our planet is stressed to the max and could use a little tenderness, an act of kindness. So Jambo went around the world and he made friends on every continent. And so I published my second book, Team Jambo, and took this to the Cumberland Academy of Georgia in hopes that I could connect with the kids in some way. And these puppets that they created and the story of Jambo gave them a life purpose. All of a sudden, these children, who really had very little interest in communicating or doing the hard knock life like the children upstairs, found their voice and found a purpose, a life purpose, found a reason that they could get up on stage and speak. And they became the voice of endangered baby animals. So this moved me and motivated me beyond belief. If the performing arts, which was my first passion, helped me as I saw little ones come in and out, transformed and shining and sparkling, finding their voice, putting down their technology, connecting with children around them, an art I hope we don't lose, which is the human touch and human interaction, I was amazed at what I saw. I watched children who never really spoke or connected to classmates, arm in arm, and I decided that I would make Jambo's Journey a multimedia platform, because if you can't beat them, join them. So my expertise is not the media. My expertise was not these things, or publishing books, or this was just a passion I had. It was an idea that sprung from my creativity as a child. It was easy for me to paint a set about the planet, write songs, and do dances, but that's really not where entertainment was heading with children. Children woke up and looked at media. And so I developed an online world, an imaginary world, that children can connect to endangered species and feel needed and feel like they can protect something and feel like they can make a difference in the planet. So I'm so excited because I have 2 songs. I'm a lyricist as well. I have 2 songs on iTunes, and my books are on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles. But the most recent thing that I've done is I've created this website that allows children to create arts and crafts with recycled objects. So there's a whole line of programs that parents can engage with their children. We make recycled objects, binoculars from toilet paper rolls. I think we can all agree that reduce, reuse, recycle is a simple message, but an essential one. I have a recipe for the chefs in the house. I know there's a couple. A recipe segment for kids to connect to their creative chef and go from continent to continent. And all of these activities are things that children today, many children today, don't take the time to just decompress from technology. And if you're a parent or a grandparent, you know what I'm talking about. If you just sit at a restaurant, you know what I'm talking about. Every moment that people are with one another seem to be connected to mobile devices and tablets. The really exciting thing that I want to share is that Jambo's Journey, I just finished filming a television pilot. And so this year I'll be launching a TV show, hopefully, for kids that teaches them that every day is Earth Day. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite songs that I've just launched is called Earth Day. And the message is that one small act of kindness, collectively, if everyone on the planet engaged in one small act of kindness a day, the impact it would make. So the performing arts, Annie, Broadway shows, that's my passion. But my life purpose is creating a safer, self-sustainable world, a happy and safe and lovely place for children and humanity. I know that's an awful lofty goal for a girl from Fort Worth, Texas, who went to New York City with the dream and spark in her eye to be on stage. But I'm very, very thankful for Wendy having me here tonight to share with you. I'm very excited. I feel I want to drink out of Lisa's glass so that my books will be on every shelf in the country, and I'll be on the Sally Jesse Raphael show. So I'm going to make sure I drink after her. And I was very inspired by what you said, Jeff, and thankful to share the evening with you as well, John. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope that we have more BASE talks like this. Tonight has been great, and I just want to leave you with passion is amazing, but I think it's the thing that connects us as humans is life purpose, and finding that and answering not just where the universe came from, but how we fit in and how we can make a difference. Thank you so much for your time.
Just don't go Tina on me, please. Very sorry of pronouncing your name wrong. Okay, so now we're going to jump into the fun section, the question and answer. So if I could get all of the speakers to come back up, we're going to have these lovely chairs for you guys.
Get that? Aww. My bestie.
Wow. Okay, give these guys a round of applause. And Wendy, come back out. Let's give this lady a round of applause as well. Good job. Congratulations. So now the tough questions. What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Okay, good. Where is Tina?
Tina is in Minneapolis, and she is now happily married. Yay,
Yay.
Tina!
We love that.
She saw the error of her ways.
Okay, so let's have a serious question.
Okay.
Dating advice column to turning into a novel. How does that translate?
Yeah, so thank you. That's a great question. So my first book, actually, my first novel was called 15 Minutes of Shame, and it's actually about a dating expert who gets dumped on national television. Because after I went on the Sally Jesse Raphael show and I sold that book and it was doing really well, I thought like, oh my God, what if you like tie your professional life to your personal life and your personal life crashes and burns? And as soon as my panic attack was over, I thought this could be a really interesting idea for a novel. So, and in particular, that people think that if you're an expert in something, that maybe you're really good at it. And sometimes you are, but sometimes it's easier to put those things, to tell someone else what to do, as we all know, than it is to do it yourself. And so my first novel, 15 Minutes of Shame, was about this dating expert who gets dumped on national TV and sort of the fallout from that. And the novel that I have out now, Single Minded, which is my new book, I'm very excited about it, is actually about a woman who finds out after, she marries her childhood sweetheart, and they have this great little life, and neither one of them have ever dated anybody else, and they're just about to turn 30 and have babies and all of this, and it turns out he's gay, which is really inconvenient for her. Shocker, right? Which happens a ton. I get a lot of letters from the ladies in particular. It happens a lot more than you would think.
Damn that Tina.
Yeah, Tina. Oh, Tina. We got to worry about her. So this idea that you could never have been on a date in your entire life and then start dating at 30 was really fascinating to me. And yet it's something that happens with a lot of regularity. It's really shocking how frequently this happens. Or if you get married when you're young and then you maybe get divorced or you're widowed and you find yourself in the dating pool at like 45, 50, 70, and you've never been on a date other than your husband, or you haven't slept with anybody who's not gay for 35 years, then there can be some challenges. So yes, there's a lot of that. And one of the things that this character does is that she's going on these dates for the first time, and I have this huge, all these experiences from all these women and men all over the country who have written in, who said, like, you would not believe what happened to me.
Their name was Tina.
That's right.
Thank you. Juxtaposition here. Let's get into some serious stuff down here at the end with Mr. Jeff. So, why does the universe matter? What does it matter to us, and why should we care?
That's the only one we got. So, well, actually, that might not be true. We may live in a multiverse, so this may be the best universe for us, but there could be others. I started caring about this in 1995. I was actually on my way to study vertebrate paleontology. I was a dinosaur freak in evolutionary biology. And in 1995, we discovered the first planet orbiting another star. And suddenly that whole idea about looking for life on other planets was not just a crackpot scheme. You could actually proudly be part of that science because there were actually new places to study. And if you want to answer that question, could there be life out there? Well, you have to understand how these places came to be and if they had the same stuff that we had here and what the whole process was like. And that begins this whole journey to try to understand the universe as a whole and how we fit into it. And it suddenly dawned on me that everybody should know this because we all kind of want to know where we fit into all of this. And it doesn't have to be buried in science books, and it doesn't have to be something that's a pass-fail type of situation where you have to take an astrophysics class to know all this. This should be common knowledge. And I think it's become more that over the past few years with Neil deGrasse Tyson following up on the other great science popularizers we've had over the years. So we should care because you are part of this, and understanding that story gives you a broader horizon than you will find just in your community or in your own backyard. You're part of something much, much larger.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's go to John next. John, you gave us a great synopsis on old retailers and new retailers. So anybody that may be in the audience right now thinking about opening a brick and mortar retail store, what is your advice?
Think again.
Exactly.
What kind of guidance would you give them if they are going down that path?
Well, I think first of all you have to have a passion for it. It's like your passion. You couldn't do what you do without being passionate.
That's right.
You can't sell merchandise if you're not passionate about what you're selling. And you're making somebody happy. You're giving them an opportunity to do something because you've helped them. I really think that we make things awfully complicated. Do you like this? Oh, yeah, that's a nice start. So, I mean, you don't have to get really tangled up in all kinds of difficult concepts and, you know, is this the right fashion for today's world? I think you just go do it and let it be you. And if I'm telling somebody, don't be me, you know, be you. Choose what you want to be and present that to the world and present that to yourself.
Good answer. That's why he's got a degree from Harvard. So, Jenny from the block, we're going to go to you next. I got it right. I had to do some name-word association here so I could remember it.
Fine.
You know, being on stage is difficult for some people. Standing in front of a microphone, people panic and they freeze. You've obviously been in the spotlight for a long time and been on stage, commercials, televisions. What has been your toughest role to ever fit in?
Wow. I think the most challenging and rewarding role is motherhood. I mean, I think that has been the toughest because that's not an act.
That's real life.
That's real life. And so, you know, it's easy to have a script and memorize it and, you know, have one take or two takes if it's film or television, no takes if it's stage, but you have improvisation and the audience really doesn't know the lines anyway, so, or the dance steps. So I would always tell my students there is no mistake in theater because the audience doesn't know the correct steps, so just keep shining and fake it till you make it, you know, for the kids. But I think the most difficult role is being a mom, because being a parent, because you have to be authentically you, and you have to find the balance between, you know, giving your children the freedom to create and be all that they can be, and yet put up guardrails and boundaries for them, and to be loving and friendly and be a confidant, someone they can come to, and yet still be the parent and the boss. Because children don't need a friend, a BFF, they need a parent. They need guidance and they need discipline and structure. But they also need the freedom and ability to create and be authentically themselves, as John said, and find what it is, the reason they're in the universe, like Jeff said. And hopefully our daughters will have dates and husbands.
And not be Tina.
Like Lisa, and not be Tina. And I'm also very proud of my stepsons and very grateful that my youngest stepson works for Amazon. So there we go.
Well, he's got a job.
Yeah, so that's a good thing. I think motherhood, I would have to say parenthood. You know, if you watch the shows on TV, This Is Us, and all the comedies and drama, much of it stems around family life. It is the modern family is a complex and beautiful thing, but a challenge to navigate.
Awesome. Thank you. So you guys have heard some amazing questions already because I came up with them. And now it's your turn as an audience to be the first one to raise your hand. And of course, it's Leah's mother. Of course, it's Leah's mother. What question would you like to ask, and to who?
Actually, to each person. As a retired educator, how do you think that we are doing in Manatee, or Bradenton especially, in preparing our youth to be in your different areas?
Well, I have the microphone, so I'll share first, then pass it along. I had the real privilege of working at the Anna Maria Elementary School, and I think that the schools and the teachers and administrations locally are doing an incredible job, especially in the area of conservation and geoliteracy and things like that. I actually created an online program for teachers as a handbook to use to help children become good stewards of the planet and to connect to one another in education. It's a great school. I think we're doing a great job. I think I'm very, impressed about the arts, but obviously I'm very passionate about the arts and the sciences being in school. And I think that with those two things, with us focusing on STEM and STEAM, adding the A in there, I think we're guaranteed success with our next generation.
John, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think we're blessed with a good educational system. I mean, we've got a big state, and we've got a lot of different school systems. Sarasota is probably a little higher ranked than Manatee, but Manatee is improving consistently. And I think that just making an educational commitment to your community is the single most important thing any of us can do, whether you have children or not, because all kids grow up to be adults. So I think we're in the right place. We're making good time. We can always do better.
Support a teacher, always.
I spent my afternoon with developmentally challenged second graders today, making planets in a bottle, and had a blast. And we do stuff like this all the time. The museum, the South Florida Museum, is really engaged with the local school district, with the private schools, with the parochial schools, with the homeschooling community, with administration, with all levels. We've got a pre-K class that goes to school in the museum every day. So we have 4-year-olds running around, opening our eyes to new ideas every day, because that's their school. The museum is their school. And it's that kind of creativity that's coming from our local school district, saying, can we do a school in a museum? What else can we do together? Who else can we bring in as a partner? There are always going to be limited resources. There are always going to be challenges with a county-sized school district. But there's also a lot of great things in our community that can be pulled in, and the more we get folks saying, yeah, I want to be a part of this as well, and you see that all the time, every year. The ships rise with the tide, right? And it gets better and better and better. So I feel really optimistic about the future of education in our community.
I'm always bragging about your summer camps.
Yay. And summer camps. We actually do educational science camps, which the kids love.
Thank you. So I have a slightly different take. So my kids went to school in Sarasota County. My daughter goes to school in Sarasota County, and while I was a PTO president for several years, and one of the things that I did there was I was involved with the school referendum. And I think one of the big differences between Sarasota County and Manatee County is that Sarasota passed the referendum, and I think part of that is when the referendum was scheduled, and Manatee, the referendum here did not pass. And you guys are scheduling it now for a different time of year. I think it's going to be held in March this year, is that right? That's really one of the really critical things. You have Sarasota and Manatee, which are right next door to each other, and we have so many things in common, and so many really committed community members. What Sarasota has that Manatee does not have is more money, and Florida State funds education at one of the lowest levels in the country, and I'm sorry, you could have the most talented teachers in the world, and if they don't have the funds necessary, they are not able to do everything that they can do. And so the first thing I would encourage everyone who lives in Manatee to get out and vote for the referendum, because that money makes a difference. You're talking about, for us, it was extra 30 minutes to the school day. Science teachers in elementary school, because who knew science was optional in elementary school? And art and music and things like that are really critical and important. And so I think that's probably the biggest, it's one of the biggest contributors. And as far as whether or not we're sort of preparing kids to be good writers, again, I think teachers are challenged right now because we have such a reliance on these, the rubric, the tests, and all this. And I know that when my kids were in elementary school, they would do these, they would be on these computer programs where they had to type an essay into some program and it would judge their writing. And you would get penalized if you used said too often or the. And so you would have kids writing stories where every character exclaims something or screams it. And yet, when you're a writer, if I'm saying he said, he screamed, he yelled, that's actually really distracting for the reader. It was something that was really incredibly frustrating to me, and I started talking about this with a group of other authors, that I was concerned that we were teaching kids via these programs and via this sort of computer-graded assessments that not to write, not to connect with other people, which is what writing is all about. That said, there are some amazing, amazing teachers, and they are still the best, the best place to learn good writing. They're still the best place to get kids on fire about reading, which is the most important step to becoming a good writer. So in some ways, I think there are things that we can do as a community, get out and vote, and other things that our teachers are doing a really great job of.
Awesome. Thank you. So we have a question over here.
So I was going back to the first presentation, John. I was curious about, you mentioned when Sears, the ship started sinking, when they diversified to 40 different brands. Was that really when they turned the wrong way, or were they going to head the wrong way anyways because of the transition to digital and just the changing of the times?
I think it's a combination of things, actually, but Sears was beginning to lose its momentum. They were being challenged by the big box folks, and they're also, in the short term, being challenged tremendously by Amazon. And so they kind of got it from both sides. I would say that I'd be surprised if Sears is around 5 years from now. And maybe that's longer than it deserves, given, I have nothing against Sears. I grew up with Sears. I think it's a terrific long-term brand that's just been horribly mismanaged.
But there was nothing wrong with that 1,000-page Christmas catalog every year.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Next question.
So hindsight is always 20/20. This is kind of for all of you guys. What would be something that you learned from that you think was a mistake then, but now taught you something great about your career, maybe life in general?
Oh, that's a good one.
No.
She wrote about Tina, didn't pay her.
I know. I don't know. I'm not sure I can answer that question, because I really believe that failure is built into the process of success, and so it's very difficult for me to say, like I always think that anything that I learned or that came of some terrible error is something that was sort of necessary in order to get to that great thing. And also, they gave me the microphone first, and I couldn't think of a good story. Terrible failure. I do have a terrible failure, but it's not related to writing, but it's sort of related to writing. I'm a parent of 2 kids, and they're lovely, delightful human beings, and I'm proud to know them and have raised them. And so I've always been sort of open to doing things differently. My mother was a really good parent. I sort of feel good about the force, and so I feel like I basically know what I'm doing, even if I don't quite know what I'm doing. And so I'm sort of open to trying different things. And I swear like crazy. I have the worst potty mouth ever. I always tell my kids I'm a writer, so I get to use all the words. Well, and I did really keep it together, keep the potty mouth under control while my kids were young. But my son, when he was about 3rd grade, had this little friend who was a sweet kid, but he grew up with this family that was very, and I had really kept it together, swear in my car or whatever. But But so this little boy had just like this crazy potty mouth. And he was the sweetest kid, but like you would not believe the words that came out of this kid's mouth. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, because Quinn, my son, starts picking up on some of this stuff, and I'm like, oh, this is not acceptable to say, blah, blah, blah. So we talk about that kind of thing. And I was clearly losing this battle. And so I thought, I have a genius idea. And that is that I would give my son a list of acceptable words. You can't say this, we never say this. If you're 40 and you say this word, you're going to be grounded. But you can say these words, but you can't say them in front of anyone who's younger than you, and you can't say them in front of any adults. Which is what I'm thinking he's going to do anyway, but I've now like created these parameters of acceptable swearing. And what happens for this is that my son gets used to swearing with his friends, and then all of a sudden he's swearing at home. Now he doesn't swear in front of other adults, and he doesn't swear in front of people who are younger than him. But the swear, like once I sort of gave that little bit of permission, even though it was only like 2 words, it like took off like this crazy thing. And so now this child, who is brilliant and funny and really just a decent human being, has the worst potty mouth. And so that would be my big parenting failure. It's not a writing failure, but it's related. Yeah.
I'm going to interject a little story on that, because I remember when I was a kid sitting with my mother doing homework at the kitchen table, and it just wasn't the best word that came out of my mouth. And when I realized I said it, there was a hand that came this way. And when it hit me, I said it again, and it came back. And so I wish we had had parameters of being able to say what I wanted to say, but that didn't work out in our family. So I learned real quick not to say that again to anyone that was related. Perfect.
A quick learner. Very good. I was going to share, because I can definitely talk from experience on that, especially following up on the things that John has shared with Sears and Amazon. I mean, I had a brick and mortar performing arts school. So I had students that would come to my retail space. I built out a theater. This is all very expensive to build and very expensive to maintain. And my hats off and bravo and standing ovation to the Manatee Performing Arts Center for all the work that they're doing and allowing us to have this space tonight. But it's very expensive. So when I saw that children were drawn to media and multimedia, I said to myself, I'm not going to make that mistake again, because sets are expensive, and then I would tear them down, and paint's expensive. And so when I created my next venture, it was not going to be a brick and mortar. It was going to be an online store. I was going to create product that I could sell online, books online, iTunes, and product and content. That I could provide for children also, because I realized that in a brick and mortar I could impact 10 children, which was awesome, but with the World Wide Web streaming, I could make a greater impact with my message by having it online. So I've painfully learned many, many lessons of that, but having a retail space today is a very complex and very hard thing to navigate, to have a storefront and try to sell and keep up with the raising rates and rentals and compete with monsters and massive, global enterprises like Amazon is really daunting.
Go ahead.
I just want to add one thing about the school tax. Sarasota's had this since 2001. It's going up for a vote in March. The one thing I would say is that on Longboat Key, there are 8 children who attend Sarasota schools. Not surprising when you look at the population there. The people who live on Longboat Key vote 94% in favor of the tax. So it's not just education, it's quality of life.
You don't want to talk about a mistake?
It's a tough question. I've always been one of those say yes to opportunities when they arise. So I was at the American Museum of Natural History in New York for a decade and decided that I did not like winter anymore and that I should seek warmer pastures, if not greener pastures. So I took a job down in Fort Myers, a small little science museum down there, which was a huge, huge change from a big, big international museum to a little place down there. And was just getting myself situated and trying to figure out how all this is going to work. And then there's this hurricane called Charlie. And he was supposed to be going to some town I had never heard of, Braden Town or something like that. And then I got woken up at 3:30 in the morning and saying, it turned. And when I came back, because I did know this, get out of the way of a hurricane. You have enough warning, get out of the way of these things. When I came back, my little science museum was no more. The roof had gotten ripped off and all the exhibits were trashed. And I said, I think I made a mistake. I should not have given up the museum in New York. I should have stayed up there, and because hurricanes happen here and they rip museums apart. But then opportunities present themselves, that door window thing, and it turned out that there was a wonderful little museum in a town called Braden Town that was spared by Hurricane Charlie, and I've been here ever since. So sometimes what you think was a mistake and what you think was something that was unfortunate turns out to turn you in a direction that turns out to have great fortune down the road. So I don't think in terms of mistakes, I think in terms of opportunities created by those mistakes.
Perfect. Thank you. Do we have time for one more, or we're good? Oh, you have something you want to say? Oh, come up here. Come up here.
No, I'm actually volunteering to come back down here instead of being forced. Actually, I think everybody can hear me. First of all, I could not have chosen 4 better speakers. Thank you. You guys were amazing. And actually, when I said 5 gems in our community, I really meant 6. I don't know if you've all been sort of walking by Donna Gauntlet over there, who's been feverishly drawing for us while you all were on stage. And we have a gift to present to you for speaking today. So I would like to give you all what Donna's vision was with you on stage. So these are...
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And you made me thin, thank you.